West Virginia fans, how does your running back room look for 2022? We will dive into that and much more here at Mountaineers Live, right here at the Voice of College Football for the next 60 minutes. Leave those comments, leave those questions, anything that you've got. Give us your take in the comments section, and we will get to you. We got Travis Kenobi on the line, of course, from Last Word on College Football. And up top, Justin Walker from Kuz's Corner right here on YouTube. So check out his work right here on YouTube as well. Kuz's Corner. Boys, how we doing?
Doing all right, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Appreciate you being here. Yeah, you guys supply the brains. I just start things out and set the table. So here we go. West Virginia's got a wide receiver coach. Your old one, of course, moved on to Notre Dame. So, Travis, what do we know about one I lost track of his name. Tony Washington from Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, so Tony Washington, Coastal Carolina. He coached the receivers there for 2 years. He was a grad assistant at Louisville before that, and essentially an analyst at Eastern Carolina the year before that. And he had 4 years in the NFL right before that. So he's an NFL guy. Has some experience, not a whole lot. Didn't play too much in the 3 years he was in the NFL, but he's not, he's not sort of a big splash hire, so to speak. But he worked really well with the wide receivers on Coastal Carolina. So I think he'll be able to duplicate sort of the energy and emphasis on skill and route running that he put into place at Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, I like the hire. Wasn't what I was expecting by any stretch of the imagination. But after doing some research on the guy and seeing that he's been successful and how well he's done with the guys he had at Coastal Carolina and the different experience he brings with what I like about him is he's coached under different guys, under different types of offenses. So he's going to bring a whole new perspective, in my opinion, to that room when they're the game planning every week than what we have now. Most of the guys we have now are all from a similar background, and I think he comes from a different background, working under Scott Satterfield and also under Jamie Chadwell, obviously. So I think that I think it's going to be real interesting to see what our offense looks like in this upcoming season. I think it's going to look different. I really do.
So, Kuz, what were you expecting?
I was expecting somebody that either had a close connection with Graham Harrell or Neil or someone from that air raid tree. You know what I mean? Somebody that most of us have heard of, maybe. But this guy doesn't seem to have any connection with either of those guys as far as his career goes. Comes from a whole different background. So, which I think is a good thing, honestly. You need different voices in the room. You need different perspectives.
Absolutely. Travis, anything more on this hire? Tony Washington, new wide receiver coach coming in from Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, so one of the things that impressed me the most looking into his background is that, I've only watched a couple of Coastal Carolina games and didn't really, I understood they ran some version of the option, but didn't really understand it that much. But they run a speed triple option, and they don't pass that much. They throw the ball less than 40% of the time. But when he came on board, his leading receiver the prior year had caught for 497 yards. And then enter Washington, and in 2020, this guy caught for went for 998 yards and 10 touchdowns. And the next year, over 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. And that's in a triple option. That's pretty significant production. Also in the triple option, you ask your wide receivers to block a lot. And looking at some of the game film, I found a few where they showed every offensive play for the games that Coastal Carolina played in, and his receivers were technically sound on the blocking front as well, which is something that we've struggled with. It got a little better last year, but the 2 years before that, it was terrible. So I think seems like he brings some moxie to that room that is much needed. So we'll see how it plays out, but could be pretty good.
I totally agree, Travis. I actually did a video on this today and talked about the blocking. I mentioned it briefly in there. I think that's one of the reasons West Virginia has struggled to run the ball as well as we'd like. They have trouble breaking big runs is because they don't get a good blocking on the outside and down the field at times. And I think that anybody who runs a triple option offense, their wide receivers are blocking or they're not getting yards. So I think that's going to be a huge benefit. And who knows, maybe that's one of the reasons they've got this guy, because of that. I don't know, but
No, it's a great point.
I like that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, no, it's a great point about the wide receiver blocking. It's not something that gets a whole lot of talk, but long runs are usually attributed to wide receiver blocking, and even short runs that are necessary on the perimeter. And that's a pretty good assumption to make, that in that offense that they're coaching up the wide receivers, maybe more so in some more traditional spread offenses to run block. Also, to your point, they only threw the ball about 300 times. Of course, Grayson McCall's running that triple option, threw it about 300 times in 13 games. So they're only throwing the ball about 25 times a game. So it's not necessarily Army or Navy, but still a lot less than the national average. And they rely on the running game, rely on those wide receivers, and more of their role is toward the blocking end than just going down and catching the ball. Yeah. All right, good stuff.
He also has experience. He had that 1 year as a grad assistant at Louisville, and they run a spread offense as well. So he's coached receivers in both types of offenses. So it's not like he's just got a singular background.
And I mentioned Scott Satterfield. Obviously, he's a coach at Louisville that he worked under, and he played for Scott Satterfield at Appalachian State. Scott Satterfield, if you study Scott Satterfield's background, he's pretty knowledgeable in all different types of offenses. Scott Satterfield doesn't really have a set. You don't look at him as an air raid guy or a spread guy or not. He's run them all. He'll run anything. He's just an offensive mind that can go out and scheme up whatever he needs to scheme up based on what he has on his team. So I think that coming from that different background, like I mentioned earlier, and working for somebody who's that offensive minded and with that much knowledge, you can't do anything but help him. And I think he'll bring a different voice to the room.
The surprise comment of the night comes in from Talk Is Pitt, who says West Virginia sucks.
Still.
We expect that, Talk Is Pitt, but maybe be a little more creative next time. Maybe we can ask you to step up and do that. All right. Prince Bowie is certainly grateful for the Winston Wright move from West Virginia to Florida State. I always love these.
One.
What's that?
See, they got a fast one.
Yeah. Always like these Google questions. I refuse to answer these. Is Neil Brown still the head coach? Did West Virginia go 6-7 last year? It's called Google. All right. The Rod Farb, I appreciate you being here as well. All right. Talk Is Pitt. Hey, Talk Is Pitt. We love you. You chime in on tons of shows here at the Voice of College Football. So you are welcome. You are definitely welcome. It was just an easy target tonight. Got Travis Kenobi here, of course, from Last Word on College Football. Check out his work and Couz's Corner right here on YouTube. I'll have the banner up here in just a second. Couz's Corner. Got to check out his work. Just dropped a video on the wide receiver coach that's come in. All right, we're going to do some position previews. Guess we'll start at quarterback, boys. We'll look at Jarrett Dagey. Of course, he's moving on. And the quarterback room as it stands right now, you got Garrett Green. You've got Goose Crowder. You got Nicole Markiel, who's gotten most play, at least on this show, in regards to thoughts that he could be the starter. Travis, your thoughts about the quarterback room as we head towards spring practice?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch it unfold. Graham Harrell has pretty much told us that he's talked to all of the quarterbacks since, within just a day of being hired. Of course, he hasn't had the chance to see them play on the field yet. And he said that he's going to use spring to really figure out what each of those quarterbacks does well and sort of assess from there. So for people saying, hey, who's going to be the quarterback next year? The answer is coach doesn't know. We don't know. But I think we have three guys who have the potential to be pretty good. Unfortunately, they lack the experience to show that they have been. In particular, well, just to show the lack of experience, I'm just pulling up my handy snap count chart that totals everybody from every year. And Garrett Green has had 136 snaps in his career so far, and Will Crowder has had 8. And obviously, the incoming freshman Nico Marchiol has had 0. So it's pretty young room. Garrett Green, we've seen seems like he bails out of the pass pretty quickly and goes into a run. He's kind of a run first mentality guy. Will Crowder, from what we've seen, is a true pocket presence, and Nico seems to bring a little bit of both. But again, we haven't seen him play at this particular game speed, and everybody knows there's a big difference between high school and college game speed. So it'll be interesting to watch it play out. Interested to hear what you think, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, you're right on the money. Obviously, nobody knows, not even the coaches. But I listened to Graham Harrell's interview with Mountaineer Insider podcast a couple weeks ago, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but he spent a lot more time talking about Goose Crowder than he did the other two guys. They asked him about Garrett Green. He said the guy can run around and make plays. That's pretty much all he said. They asked him about Nico. He said he knew Nico from his days at USC because USC recruited him. Said he's a good quarterback. That's basically. But they asked him about Goose Crowder, and he was like raving about the guy. Like he couldn't. Like he said, he had already met with him more than he had the other two guys. Goose had already been in his office more than the other two guys, which makes me think that the kid's wanting to learn and is eager. And he also talked about how when he walks in the room, he has the it factor. He didn't say it that way, but he said he's got a presence about him that every quarterback needs. And it just made me think that he just seemed to have a lot more to say, maybe, than he did the other two guys, which kind of makes me think that maybe there's something there. Maybe there's a really good connection between those two guys. And maybe Goose, everybody's talked about Garrett Green last year. Everybody wanted him to play. And now everybody's talking about Nico. And I think at the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised if Goose ends up being their quarterback next year, to be honest.
Yeah, I can see that. And you're right. I just went back to my notes on that particular podcast, and Goose's name was mentioned more than any of the others. And about him, the word that he used was that, and he said this about both Goose and Nico. He said that they both have intangibles, and he said specifically that once you get to a certain baseline of skill level. At least Graham Harrell's viewpoint is that the intangibles matter more than anything else, because if everyone has the same baseline skill, there has to be something to set them apart. I really do think it's going to come down to those two in the battle. And I think we'll have a decent sense of who's spinning the ball better and who's managing the offense a little better after the Gold and Blue game in late April.
I agree, but I wouldn't count out Garrett Green still being part of the offense. And I think in this whole hiring of Washington, I know he wasn't offensive coordinator, but could they throw in some wrinkles for him could they throw in some option wrinkles to use with Garrett Green in the running game? That wouldn't surprise me if they do that, because he did have some success running the football last year. Very little throwing, but it wouldn't surprise me to see some option type stuff thrown in in order to utilize Garrett Green's mobility. But I don't expect him to be the starting quarterback, but we'll never know. I trust whoever they choose will be the best guy for the job.
Yeah, certainly once they get into practice here this spring, it's all going to come down to who grasps the offense, who can sling it the best, who can make the best decisions. But just look in the recruiting rankings, Nico's the highest ranked 19th rated quarterback coming out of high school. Garrett Green was the 21st rated dual threat quarterback, and Goose Crowder at number 43 in their respective classes. All right. Anything else we want to hit on at the quarterback position?
I'll make it. I still wouldn't be surprised if they go out and nab some veteran quarterback out of the portal either, to be honest. There's still a few guys left in the portal who have like 1 year of eligibility left.
Well, I got to say,
what's that?
I got to say, it being the most important position on the field, and this being this just a limited amount of experience, that I'm a bit surprised that what I would consider to be reasonable Mountaineer fans, I believe in the chat, are optimistic about 8-4, 9-3 with this much inexperience at quarterback.
Yeah, and I know he's reached out to. I know Neil Brown has talked to a couple of guys that were in the portal. One guy chose to go back to his other school, and the other one ended up going to Washington State in Cam Ward. And then the other guy was a D2 kid out of West Virginia. But so they have looked into the portal at quarterbacks. I don't think they're going to stretch for somebody and get somebody that they don't think's a fit. But I think if there's somebody in there that they think will be a fit and that would help, it wouldn't surprise me to see them bring somebody in, if nothing else, just to be a mentor and some leadership to the room and just somebody else to compete for the spot. I mean, competition is never a bad thing.
Folks, we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football for our West Virginia live show. We've been here 9 consecutive Friday nights. We try to hit the mark at 8 o'clock Eastern time, but we may at times need to reschedule based on everybody's schedules needing to collaborate. So keep that in mind. That means you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live for sure. Again, we intend on being here every Friday night at 8 o'clock Eastern time, talking up the Mountaineers with Coos's Corner right here on YouTube. And, of course, Travis Kenobi, last word on college football. And so looking at the running back room, last season, West Virginia ranked 103rd in the nation in rushing. That's just total yards per game. And the rush per attempt, where did I find that? 99th in the nation in yards in rushing per attempt at 3.5 yards per carry. So those numbers need to be better. So before we move on to 22, Coos, Letty Brown moves on after 1,000 yards plus, 4.8 yards per carry, 13 touchdowns this past season. And we discussed him a few weeks ago and trying to kind of place him amongst great all-time West Virginia running backs. But what did the Mountaineers lose with him departing?
They lose it. I mean, they lose a veteran. They lose a downhill runner. They lose somebody with experience. They lose one of the top 10 running backs in school history. I mean, he's like fifth or sixth in yards, total yards. But that being said, I do like what we have in that room. We've got 2 4-star recruits in Justin Johnson. I think they're 4 stars. Correct me if I'm wrong. In Justin Johnson and Jalen Anderson. And then we've got Tony Mathis, who looked pretty good at the end of last season, coming on as Letty's backup. And then we added Lynn J. Dixon out of the portal, who's a quick twitch guy from Clemson, who showed a lot of promise at Clemson, averaged over 6 yards a carry in his career there. And I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 or even 3 of those guys get a lot of carries this year. Because really the one thing we had that we were missing is Letty was really the guy. I mean, he carried the load. Tony Mathis had some injuries early in the season, wasn't able to really start carrying the ball much until middle to late in the year. And Letty just got worn down. And West Virginia needs at least 2 backs, really, in my opinion, that can split carries so that they can stay healthy for the season. And I think we have that now. And I would be okay with, any of these guys being part of that rotation, to be honest.
Yeah, I think all 4 of them will get some carries this year. Tony Mathis was injured in the beginning of the season, so they had to rely pretty heavily on Letty Brown and sort of used a combination of Garrett Green and Justin Johnson as the sort of change of pace guys throughout the season. Our quarterback Garrett Green had 48 carries, and Tony Mathis had 72. So that tells you how much they sort of relied on the backup quarterback as a change of pace. interesting way to do it, but it is what it is. I think that sort of pound for pound, Lynn J. Dixon is probably the obvious replacement for Letty Brown as that number one back. And Lynn J. Dixon, even though Letty Brown has done more volume-wise, Lynn J. Dixon was extremely efficient at Clemson. Not terribly far behind Etienne as far as efficiency went. He just didn't carry the ball as much. And if you watch the videos on Lynn J. Dixon and his highlights, that guy twitches fast, and he's patient, waits for a hole, and it doesn't take a very big one for him to spring through it. And as soon as he's out, he makes the first linebacker miss, and it's 10, 15 yards later before anybody else can grab him. So I think we will rely pretty heavily on him. But again, Tony Mathis, 72 carries this year for 312 yards. His efficiency wasn't great. It was 4.3 yards a carry, but again, as a whole, the offensive line just didn't do a good enough job, particularly on that left side, to spring those backs. Justin Johnson had some pretty big carries early in the season, and then Jalen Anderson was a late enrollee, so he didn't get to play last year. But he's a bruising back, so we've got a good combo of speed and strength, and not too worried about the running back room. Not nearly as worried about the running back room as I am quarterback, and then as we'll later get to down the line, the cornerback or the safety room rather.
Yeah, my biggest concern in the running back room would be blocking. They struggled. Letty Brown was really the only back we had that was a consistent blocker in the passing game last year. But they've got a whole offseason to correct it. As far as Tony Mathis goes, and I don't know much about Lynn J's blocking. I don't know how his blocking was at Clemson, but I know Tony Mathis struggled a little bit in the bowl game a couple of times, and Justin Johnson struggled some in the regular season. And I think that's probably the one thing that kept Justin Johnson off the field was, and kept him from getting more playing time was his inability to block consistently. But, he was a freshman, and that's one of the things most freshman running backs struggle with because they don't have to block a lot in high school.
Right.
But I got faith they'll be better at it. But, having Letty back there was pretty nice in that passing game as well.
Interestingly, though, it is like freshman running backs just seem to have difficulty with the blocking schemes in college. Simply the size difference between the the rushers in college versus high school. But both, I remember this pretty vividly, watching both Justin Johnson and Jalen Anderson's high school recruiting films. And both of them made a pretty big point to include at least a dozen plays where they sprung big blocks. They at least focused on it. They know it's a necessary part of the game. And it's really just about, sort of getting the strength and discipline necessary to, overcome the size disadvantages you're going to have in college at that position. Because, biggest running back, unless you're Derrick Henry, is about 210, 215. And sometimes you're blocking a passing or a rushing end that's 250 coming at you just about as fast as you're running. So that's a tough assignment for a young kid.
Agreed.
Yeah, if anything, you're trying to hold your ground, and they're the one moving and have the momentum, and you're just trying to hold your ground in the pocket and pick up an oncoming rusher who's got all the momentum plus the weight disparity that you just mentioned. Lynn J. Dixon, only 10 carries this past year. He got nicked up a little bit, plus he was a bit in the doghouse as well for Clemson. They brought in Phil Maffa, Will Shipley were two of their top recruits. They got the attention. He had some falling out with Dabo Sweeney. And that kind of led to what has resulted in the transfer portal to West Virginia. But before that, as you guys mentioned, over 1,400 yards, 6.5 yards per carry. So if you just want to look at it statistically and look at probabilities, if you take Lynn J. Dixon and say he's going to be the new Letty Brown in regards to workload, if you knock off a complete yard off of his per carry average over his career, he's still 0.7 higher than Letty Brown. So if you can improve your rushing attack by that much, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, we would certainly take it. And I do think, this is getting a little bit into next week, and I we'll probably look a little more closely at the offensive line room, but that the offensive line has been young the last 2 years, and it's finally a majority veteran line, which does make a difference, as we've talked about before. Returning snap counts on the offensive line matter a great deal. Talkus Pitt, it's timely that you put his comment up because he knows it all too well. They didn't look great the 2 seasons prior to last year, and then last year they have an entirely senior offensive line, and it made all the difference in the world. So I think that will help the running game as well.
Absolutely. So a struggling running game minus Letty Brown, but pick up Lynn J. Dixon, and we shall see. It certainly has to support a quarterback that, unless there's a transfer that comes in after spring practice, is going to be an inexperienced player at quarterback. Please subscribe to our West Virginia channel. You might be watching on the main channel. You might be watching on the West Virginia channel. Regardless, just look up the Voice of College Football West Virginia. You should be able to find our channel. Please subscribe. We've got content posted throughout the week, including, of course, this live West Virginia show. We appreciate Coos being here. You can catch him on Coos's Corner right here on YouTube. Travis Kenobi, last word on college football. All right. We don't expect the likes of Sivion Wilkerson, Jalen Anderson, Marquand Rucker, any of those guys to be any kind of a factor.
Well, Jalen Anderson, we mentioned, is one of the 4-star guys who was came in late, so he'll probably be a factor. But the walk-ons that you mentioned, Rucker and those guys, I doubt it. I mean, they'll be a factor on the team for sure. Everybody sort of discounts the effect of the practice squad and the types of looks that they give their defense, but factor on the field in games, I doubt it.
Joey's in the chat, of course, holding down the chat. And Joey, check your email. There's a reason you're not a mod. So check your email, see what you need to do to become a mod. So got your email. So we'll be all set by next week, hopefully. All right. Well, I guess unless we have any other news or good questions in the chat, I got a question for both of you. We're going to go kind of in the time machine here. And I'll be searching in the meanwhile for questions and comments from the live chat. But, it's the off season, so we've had enough portal news and recruiting and everything else to keep us busy. And everybody, we're going to be breaking down position by position as we head towards spring practice. So come on back next Friday. But seems like a decent time to hit you guys up on your most exhilarating moment as a West Virginia fan. What is the top of the line, top of the list moment? People usually think, okay, it's got to be a championship game or something like that, but it could be, third week of September. Whatever moved you more than anything, Travis, guess I'll start with you. Yeah,
so as soon as you asked the question, I knew my answer right off the top of my head. I was a first-year student at law school the first year, the Pat White breakout year, and I attended the Louisville game, and I sort of watched it. We turned the ball over several times and went down by 3 scores going into halftime, and sort of middle of the third quarter, it still looked pretty dire, and I was in the grad student section, which is on the lower level, and most of the underclassmen students sit at the top level on the opposite side of the stadium, and that entire student section was gone. Everybody had given up hope, and then Coach Rodriguez decides, well, it's time to. But Bednarik got hurt, but he puts in Pat White and Steve Slayton and it becomes the Pat White, Steve Slayton show. And they come back, they tie it up, they go into triple overtime. The offense is rolling in a way that we hadn't seen for 6, 7, 8 years, and it just looked and felt different. And by the end of the game, the entire student section had filled back up, and that place was as loud as it's ever been. It's just a great moment. It sort of defines what college football is all about. Your team, coming in with a great comeback, sort of surprising guy you didn't think was going to be the guy at the beginning of the year comes in and makes a hero out of himself. So that's my sort of number one moment without question.
What you got, Coos?
Travis, you stole my answer, brother. I was at that game too.
Yeah,
it was the first game my dad and I ever attended together.
That's a great memory.
I'll never forget it. But because I don't want to steal your answer, I'm just going to say all 3 of their BCS bowl wins, because we were major underdogs in every one of those games. We beat Georgia in the 2006 Sugar Bowl. Major underdogs. People thought the Big East didn't have a chance against the mighty SEC. We come out and laid it on Georgia. Went up like 28-7 or 28-0 or whatever it was. And Georgia almost came back.
Yep.
Rich Rod pulled out the fake punt late in the game. We got the first down, sealed the game.
35-28, right?
What's that?
35-28?
Something like that. I'm not great at remembering scores, but it was in that ballpark.
No. I'm going to guess this one, Travis, before you correct me, because I usually hit scores, even if I don't care about the game. They all stick to my brain. I think I messed up on that. I think it was 38-35. Does that sound better?
That does sound closer to me. Because
Yeah,
I'm thinking it was a 3-point game, but I'm not good at remembering scores, so I'm probably the wrong guy to answer the question. But I can remember plays from the game better than I can the final score. But obviously then you had the Fiesta Bowl win over Oklahoma after Rich Rod had bailed on us, where we were major underdogs again. Everybody said Oklahoma's the best team in the country. They should be in the national championship. West Virginia has no chance. They're going through a coaching change. The runaway beer truck, Steve Slayton and Pat White just absolutely, and Noel Devine as well, just ran all over Oklahoma.
I'm going to take a guess on that one too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was 48-28.
You nailed that one. That one I remember.
All right.
Man, you've got an iron trap, Mark. You're not even a West Virginia fan, are you?
No. They just stick to my brain. A lot of other things don't, but scores and stats do. All right. The third bowl win.
Orange Bowl. Dana Holgerson's first year. We had a controversial coaching change from Bill Stewart to Dana Holgerson. Last year in the Big East, we're getting ready to change conferences. 86% of the nation predicted West Virginia would lose the game, and I remember that because one of our players held a sign up at the end of the game that said 86% doubted us. The only state in the nation that predicted West Virginia had a chance was the state of West Virginia. And that's what those guys played for, and they won. And they absolutely – now I remember this one, 70-33.
Yep.
Turning point in the game, Clemson was getting ready to run in for a tying score. Travis Garvin pulls the ball out of the running back's arms, runs it the other way for 99 yards for a touchdown and flipped the game. Tavon Austin, Geno Smith, and those guys never looked back and absolutely put it on Clemson, and honestly probably changed the course of Clemson football because they ended up firing their defensive coordinator, hiring Brent Venables. The rest is history. West Virginia went down. Clemson went up after that game. But we've always got 70-33 to lean
Absolutely.
on.
What I remember about that game, besides, Geno Smith tearing it up, is I think the score was, I'm going to guess West Virginia had 42 points at halftime. I know that they were way ahead of that final score. And that was right on the verge, a couple years removed from seeing scores like that. And it wasn't that much of a shock 3-4 years later to see those kind of scores. But at that point, that was like sitting there in the first half going, they could score like 90 points in this game if they keep this up. Like they pretty much put it on cruise control probably halfway through the third quarter in that game.
Yep.
Yeah, they did, and it was definitely man, the offensive firepower on that roster. And, even the next year, the first year in the Big 12, we put, what was it? We put 70 on Baylor the next year, didn't we? The
Yeah,
70,
yeah.
was it 70-63?
Yeah, I was at that game too.
I mean, just ridiculous amounts of yards. But, I just remember seeing that jet sweep about 10 times in that game where Tavon Austin would just take it to the house.
Yeah, they couldn't. They could do nothing with that play, and I had never seen that play before. I don't know about you guys, but that was a new play to me. Of course, now you see it all the time. Never seen anybody run it to the execution of Tavon Austin, but that play it was unstoppable. I mean, at least that night. That night they were just clicking on all cylinders, man. I mean, they just couldn't do any wrong on the offensive side of the ball that night. Just one of those nights.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about that game is that Taj Boyd was a Mountaineer under Rich Rod, and then when Rich Rod left, he switched his commitment over to Clemson. So, we played against Taj Boyd, and Geno Smith got the better of him that game,
which made room for Geno Smith to sign, if I'm not mistaken. Travis, isn't that correct?
Yeah,
isn't that the whole reason we signed Geno is because Taj left?
Yeah, and we got Geno and Stedman Stedman Bailey out of that deal.
Right.
Now, was it the next season that West Virginia got off to I'm going to guess 6-0, maybe 7-0 start, and Geno was tearing it up, and he was the leading Heisman candidate, and then it ended with like 5 consecutive losses?
Yeah, it was a rapid downhill turnaround to the negative.
Talk about the negative. Jeff Webster right here. So he's going to challenge you guys. Left Virginia is only just 5 final AP top 10 rankings and never higher than number 5. 0 legacy. Okay. Before you guys speak, because I'm sure you guys will handle this much better than I will, at least not emotionally, but at least in terms of facts and figures. Okay. West Virginia is a top 15 school in the history of college football in wins. Right around that range, right? Top 15.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Number 14.
Once you make your way through a number of teams, and not many teams, you're not going to find a whole lot of top 10 or top 5 finishes in college football, period. So understand that. There's about 6 or 8 schools that have hoarded most of those. And also that seems to be some kind of metrics that, I don't know, are a bit skewed. I think that even if that's accurate, and it probably is, we can check it easily. I'm going to guess that there were a lot of finishes just outside the top 10.
Yeah, there were, and is it a number that I can dispute? No, I mean, before West Virginia, before Don Nehlen, was pretty much literally a nothing program. It was in the old, basically I forget what they call it. It was the old SEC before it became the SEC. Maybe the SWEC,
Southland Conference. Is that the name of it?
That might be it. I mean, it's before my time, so I'm going from history books. But
it was before my time too.
But I think prior to Don Nehlen, we were like 3-44 against AP ranked teams, and that's like that's bad. And Don Nehlen came on and sort of reinvented the wheel and created the flying, or helped to create the flying WV logo, and Milan Puskar Stadium was opened that year. It sort of changed the trajectory of West Virginia football. Without that influence of Don Nehlen, I mean, we'd be Marshall, and we're not. I saw some comments from a Marshall fan earlier about Marshall being the best team in West Virginia. That's just a joke.
Yeah, Marshall fans talk trash and they have nothing to stand on. They have never even beaten West Virginia, so they shouldn't even be in the conversation.
But to say that it has absolutely zero legacy, we've created some pretty good moments in college football. Sure. I assume somebody calling us Left Virginia is probably either a Virginia Tech or Virginia fan. And as I recall, neither of them have a national championship either. So probably wouldn't ring that bell too loudly.
Yeah, Jeff, I don't know Jeff Webster that well. I know he's a big trash talker. I think he might be a Bama fan too, if I ain't mistaken. And Left Virginia, by the way, is not an insult because we did leave Virginia. We're proud of that. So call us Left Virginia. Call us Left Virginia all you want.
You got Nick Saban from us.
That's right. We gave you Nick Saban.
Absolutely. Too, there you go.
Right there.
We also gave Texas A&M and Florida State Jimbo Fisher.
So, there you go, Travis.
Unfortunately,
if you're an Alabama fan, pick on every other school in the country and look down on them, but reserve that for everyone else and leave West Virginia alone for just, the mere presence of Nick Saban, born and bred in West Virginia. We've got these numbers as well. They're not going to completely blow anyone away, but it's respectable, no question. When you consider 130 FBS teams, 27th all-time in win percentage, 36th in conference championships. Now you have to take independent status into consideration there throughout the years, so that's even tempered a little bit. 15th all-time in wins. And in terms of rankings, being in the AP poll, 29th all-time, being included in the AP poll. There you go.
So I'll take it. Yeah, and Jeff said he confirmed Bama grad, sir. So you are welcome for Nick Saban. Unfortunately, all of our best things end up going to other states. What happened?
Except me. I haven't yet. You have, though, Travis, haven't you?
I have. I'm in Atlanta right now.
Yeah, it happens, unfortunately.
All around, surrounded by Georgia fans who were like, "Hey, you might have beat us in that bowl, but we just won the national championship."
Yeah, it's all right. I was in, but
happy for him.
You know, we Golden Blue Dude and I have spent a lot of time debating people about West Virginia and our value, things like that, and how the Flying WV is a lot more popular than people think. I was in Nashville, Tennessee a couple of days this week for a conference for my job. Within an hour of being in downtown Nashville on Tuesday night, I had one group of people and then another guy. I had a West Virginia coat with a West Virginia logo on it. And guys come up and say, "Let's go Mountaineers," in Nashville, Tennessee. So I have proof that the Flying WV is everywhere and recognized everywhere.
I remember when my wife and I were still dating, we took a trip out to New York just before New Year's, and we were in Battery Park. I had my West Virginia hat on, and a dude from Haiti just playing the guitar and singing all these songs, and he saw us, and immediately, you can guess, you know what happens next, mm-hmm. right? He starts singing Country Roads. Yep. So, New Yorker who originated from Haiti, he knows what it is too.
Yep. I'm gonna answer a question. Gamecock Chuck, who's a very good supporter of my channel, asked a question. Said, "I'm not a West Virginia fan, but what is the story behind the stadium name?" It is actually named after a wealthy donor, Milan Pushkar. Milan, I'm sure you may have heard of Milan Pharmaceuticals. Milan Pushkar was the founder of Milan Pharmaceuticals and was a West Virginia alum.
There you go.
Answer that question. That's
right.
accurate, isn't it, Travis?
It is. And I actually was just looking at how much he donated to get that named after him. And I can't find the exact number, but it was a lot.
There's also a statue of him outside of the stadium, if that tells you anything. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but
yeah, cancer took him about a decade ago, I think.
Something like that. But he's arguably the biggest donor we've ever had. He was our version of T. Boone Pickens, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Think about Oklahoma State without his contributions.
Absolutely. Okay. You know what? One other thing real quick. I don't know that you guys have touched on this. Coos, you probably did at one point when we had Golden Blue Dude on, which, by the way, just couldn't make it tonight for anybody asking. And we've seen a couple comments there in the live chat. Just couldn't make it. That's one of the reasons why we've got like 4 or 5 of us pulled together. We would like at least 2, probably 3 on every Friday night. So again, please subscribe to the West Virginia channel. Also subscribe to Coos's Corner right here on YouTube. Coos's Corner on YouTube. I'll pull up the banner here right now and follow Travis's work at Last Word on College Football. Travis, anything you're working on right now?
Just doing my own position preview articles and working on one right now for the new hire of Washington. The school has not confirmed it yet, but it's pretty much it's been confirmed by sources who usually are not wrong about this kind of stuff.
Coos, what do you have available right now?
I just put a video up today about the Washington hire. If you guys want to go check that out. Before that, I had actually done 2 videos on potential candidates for the wide receiver position job. I was completely wrong on all of them, obviously. But hopefully you'll find my video informative about the guys who I did have in mind for the job and why I wanted certain guys. But other than that, man, I'm just that's the only thing I've gotten up recently. I'm sure I'll come up with something tomorrow.
All right. Good stuff. We can talk in future weeks, and who knows if news will come out concerning West Virginia and the ACC at some point, but not getting this particular show your preference, but what is your guess, Travis, about the likelihood that West Virginia, let's say in the next 5 years, is going to join the ACC?
I still think, as we talked about that first time, I still think it really depends on if the ACC could convince Notre Dame to join. If they did, I think the chances remain pretty strong. If they got Notre Dame, they'd package it with West Virginia and be over 50%. But it's just looking less and less likely that Notre Dame can have their arm twisted hard enough, despite some things that look like they might trend in that direction. So I'd say it's probably 20% at best likely, and it really depends on Notre Dame.
And I'm going to go against what I just said about not talking about your opinion necessarily. And you want West Virginia to join the ACC.
Yeah, there's just some old rivalries that are dead right now. I mean, I'd love to be able to talk to, we'll be able to talk after September 1st, but I'd love to be able to talk to Talk's Pit about some more recent games than a decade ago. That's the history that we have. And, those of us who are older West Virginia fans, 30 plus, we miss those rivalries.
Sure.
So, yeah, that would be my preference. But
half of the Big East.
If I had my druthers, I'd rather go to the Big Ten out of all of them, but that's just never going to happen.
Yeah, half of the Big East, of course, moved into the ACC. So you've got all those series that you used to play on a either regular basis or fairly regular basis, like Boston College, Syracuse, Pitt, on down the road. All those games. Louisville used to be a frequent competitor as well. Absolutely. Coos, anything on that?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Travis. I think I was I guess optimistic about it up until I heard that interview with Shane Lyons when he made the comment that the ACC has not shown any interest in West Virginia, and I felt like that kind of put a damper on any hopes we had of joining it, at least in the next few years, because obviously if they have no interest in, and like Travis said, if they get Notre Dame. But if they're able to convince the NCAA that they don't have to have divisions, even that might not get us in. So, because then having an odd number won't matter at that point. So, I don't know, man. I'm holding out hope that we can get in at some point. I really have faith that, if anybody can get us in, Gordon Gee can do it. and Shane Lyons can do it because they both have a lot of connections with people in the ACC. But if they're not able to do it, then we probably never will. But I'd say our chances are probably – I'm probably a little more optimistic than Travis. I'd say 40%. If I had to put a number on it. But and I would like to be in the ACC because of the rivalries and also the travel. And it don't affect us as much in football because you only play one time a week and it's typically on a weekend. But with Olympic sports, man, when you have to play 2 games in a week and you play a 9:00 game at night, like in basketball, and then you have to fly back to Morgantown, the guys don't get back home until 5 a.m. and then have to be at class at 8 a.m. So it's just – and you got to do that 8-9 times a year, whereas our opponents only do it once a year. We're at a huge disadvantage in Olympic sports right now.
I got to think it hurts recruiting, both in-state but maybe even more adjoining states, where if you're right there amongst all these teams that you play on a regular basis, fill in the blanks, all the schools we just mentioned that you have a former series with. If there's a really good high school football player in Virginia, thinking about West Virginia, I think he would be more likely to choose West Virginia, knowing, hey, my family and this is what I grew up with, is seeing Virginia Tech and just name all the teams down the road, Pitt, Louisville, all these teams, as opposed to, I'm going to be playing in Iowa State and Texas Tech, et cetera, TCU, and the people that I know, the people I grew up with, the people I talk college football with, they're not really into those teams.
I think it probably does. I mean, I don't have proof that it hurts recruiting, but it can't help it. I mean, I don't think it probably makes it harder to recruit because guys don't want to. They want their family to be able to come and watch them play, and it's hard to do that when you have to travel, 1,000 miles to go.
So there's some of that, but interestingly, I won't say the name to divulge any secrets or sources, but I talked to, or one of my fellow writers talked to the family of one of our recruits this year who came from a decently far distance from West Virginia and was being recruited heavily by 2 schools in his backyard. And his parents actually encouraged him to go to the school that he felt was most like a home away from home, to sort of get him out of the nest and get him comfortable sort of being on his own and learning that independence. So I doubt that he's the only one, but I mean, in recruiting, you got to figure out what makes a kid tick and sort of craft a message around that if you can. And if you can't, then let that kid go and realize you've lost that battle. So there's, that sort of made me realize more than anything else that there's a lot more to it than just what we think is the simplistic, basic considerations.
All right, folks, please subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football West Virginia. Get us to 1,000 subs. That's a key metric according to YouTube. Once you get to 1,000, they kind of take you seriously and push that video content out into traffic. So help us there. Head on over to Last Word on College Football. Check out Travis's work there, as well as, of course, Kuz's Corner right here on YouTube. Guys, appreciate the breakdown. We're going to go offensive line next week. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds
Everybody
good.
get on back here for your offensive line preview next Friday night, plus more, of course. See you guys. Have a great weekend, and we will see you soon.
All right. Take care. Take care.